Just a few things before I start. This clipboard, if you see somebody new coming in and they're not in the Google Classroom, just please hand them the clipboard and ask them to put their information down. If you're already on there, then you don't need it. Can I just ask by looking around the room, have you been able to access the Google Classroom and get your documents and watch videos from the previous week? And yeah, it works for you?
Yes.
Any issues that I should know about or anything you want to figure that out about?
No.
Okay, Baruch Hashem. Wonderful. Thanks for coming tonight, Baruch Hashem. We'll have something on the agenda tonight, which I don't know if anyone here has ever done before. Even if you had gone to Shiva and studied Torah, I don't know how many people have ever taken one matter of Jewish law, like we spoke about last time, to start all the way in the beginning with God's words in the Torah, and go through the Mishnah, and then the Talmud, and then the Rambam, and the Shulchan Aruch, and then to see how the evolution of a halakha looks like until you come today. The reason that's so important for me is because that's how I want us to be able to learn in the future. Any topic that we bring up, you shouldn't just know, hey, this is what we do, or this is not what we do, but this is why it is that we do what we do. This is how we reach the conclusions that we reach. And B'ezrat Hashem, that's going to be the plan tonight. So, I see some people have phones. Did everyone here get a chance to read the chapter called Maran about Rabbi Yosef Karo?
Yes.
Yes. So I want to give a brief recap. There's something I wanted to announce, but I have no idea what it was. So I'm just thinking in my head, what was I going to tell everybody? I don't remember. Yeah. Yes, I am flying to Texas in a few hours after I get back to San Diego. So I'm going to be leaving it as soon after the class as I can. Doesn't mean I'm running away. It just means that as soon after the class, I'm going to head out. Normally, I would stick around. Normally, my wife would be here, but B'ezrat Hashem for next time. When I grew up in Jewish school, one theme that constantly resurfaced in Jewish studies was Jewish suffering. Always talking about how bad the Jews have it, how terrible it is for the Jews, how much the non-Jews hate us. In fact, one of the times I can imagine the most where this really struck a chord in me, my wife her nieces used to call her from New York. Little Hasidic kids, they would call her to get a bedtime story. She was like the bedtime story lady. And this lasted until we had children of our own. After that, I don't take responsibility for anybody else's bedtime stories. And my wife would tell them, the Hasidic bedtime story. And the bottom line of every Hasidic bedtime story is as follows. There was a poor Jewish man with a big long beard. And there was an evil man. He's a mayor or a duke or a bishop or whatever, fill in the blank. Somehow there's always some kind of bear costume involved to scare the little children at night. And this evil non-Jewish man always wants to devour the little Jewish children. And somehow, by a miracle of Hashem, the non-Jewish guy ends up dead, and Baruch Hashem, the Jewish children are saved. Every single story sounds like that. Every single one of them. And by the time, night 3 rolled around, night 4 rolled around, I told my wife, it's bad enough you're scaring little children before they go to sleep. But it's not normal. All the stories are the same way? She's like, what's wrong with the stories? Let me tell you, first off, the vilification of non-Jewish people is like off the hook. I mean, it's off the charts. Every single non-Jewish person you ever walk in the world wants to kill you. And on top of that, the little Jewish children, how do they get saved? Not that the non-Jewish guy discovers Hashem and becomes a better person. He ends up dropping dead. Someone recently shared with me a story. I mean, I don't know if the story is real, but for real, they shared with me the story. That there was a non-Jewish man, a Jewish man married to a non-Jewish woman, and after many years of her trying to convert to Judaism and it didn't work out, at a certain point she just dropped dead, and Baruch Hashem, the man wasn't married anymore to somebody not Jewish. I was so disturbed by the story because the happy ending is that she dropped dead after so many years of trying to join the Jewish people. But there are some Jewish communities, and I'm not going to blame them for it, that just haven't had such pleasant experiences with the people that they lived around. Our world of halakha, be it the Rambam or the Shulchan Aruch, both of them live in a world that is very different for the Jewish people than in other communities. Yeah, Rabbi Yosef Karo does end up in the Spanish expulsion and running away his family to Portugal and Turkey and then Israel. But somehow, in the understanding of Jewish law that we have, we talk about this golden era of Spain. The golden era of Spain was a beautiful time for us. We were close with the king, we were involved in the government. The Jewish people were very wealthy, very involved. Our neighbors were friendly with us. Yes, and at a certain point in time, people got up and threw us out, and the rest is literally history. But Rabbi Yosef Karo, Maran means our master. This is the world in which he's raised. It's the shadow of this golden era of Sfarad, of Spain. You probably read Maran traveled, his family, they finally end up in Israel. Why in Israel? What's so special about Israel?
Endpoint.
Why is Israel a safe place for the Jews?
It's an endpoint.
Yeah, but why?
Turkish.
Very good. Israel is under the Ottoman Empire. We may associate Turkey today with not loving the Jewish people, but then, compared to Europe, Turkey was heaven.
You welcome them.
Well, of course. The Jews were welcome, not just in Turkey proper, but anywhere in the Ottoman Empire, and that extended to Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. Maran finds himself in the city of Tzfat. Kabbalist or not, if you think about what the city of Tzfat looked like, it was like out of a Harry Potter book. I mean, this was like overflowing with rabbis, with poskim, with Kabbalists. You have living in Tzfat in the generation of Rabbi Yosef Karo, you have Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, the author of Tomer Dvorah. You have Rabbi Elazar Askeri, you want to pronounce his name, he wrote a song, Yidid Nefesh, that many people might be familiar with on Shabbat. Rabbi Shlomo Halevi Al-Kabetz, he writes the song, the Chadodi. Very good, he's the Chadodi. Everything sing every Friday night, that's his song. The Arizal and Rav Chaim Vital are living the generation. Mahari Berav, the one who reinstitutes the Smicha in Tzfat at this time. And the list goes on and on and on and on and on. Tzfat was flourishing under the Ottoman Empire. The Jewish community was a tremendous place. I didn't come here tonight to talk about what that generation did to halacha with the explosion of Kabbalah. That's not my purpose here tonight. But Maran lives in a world where the Jewish people are in an unbelievable place. It's almost like this messianic era is happening. The Jewish people had been through an expulsion. They're returning back to the land of Israel in the tens of thousands. And everybody's just waiting for the next step of the Geulah. The redemption should happen right now. The rabbis are back. The people are back. We're building communities, yeshivot, synagogues. Mahari Abuha, everywhere. I have a chatan here. Itai's getting married on Sunday. He lived 3 years in Tzfat. All these rabbis that I mentioned to you, they all left behind little synagogues. He prayed in all of them. If there's the golden era of Spain, it's followed by the golden era of Tzfat. And the rabbi of Rabbi Yosef Karo, his name is the Mahari Berav, he stands up and says, you know what's missing now? We're missing the unity in the Jewish people. We're missing the Jewish people should put together a Sanhedrin, the supreme Jewish court. And instead of saying these people follow halakha this way, those people follow halakha that way, I eat in this house, I don't go to that house, he said, why don't we solve the problem once and for all? Let's put together the supreme court of the Jewish people. It's easier said than done. The Rambam lays out some kind of formula that if you can get the rabbis of the land of Israel to agree to reconvene the Sanhedrin will be restored, and you'll be able to decide every single law, the way it should be. When did we lose our Sanhedrin? Do you know the story? The Romans occupied the land of Israel 2,000 years before. The name right now is forgetting me of the Chacham, the last of the rabbis of the Sanhedrin, who ordains the last 5 students in a cave somewhere in the Judean wilderness. He's in this cave, and he's teaching his students Torah. He ordains them as rabbis, as Chachamim. And immediately the Romans discover his cave, and he tells his students, run, I'm too old to run, but you at least go save the Jewish people. And these students run, and our Chachamim tell us that when they came to take the body of this rabbi out of the cave, there were so many holes inside of his corpse from the spears that were thrown into him, that if you would pour water on one side of the body, it would just come right out of the other side of the body. That's how the Romans murdered him. And there ended the last time we ever had the real title of rabbi. And they call me rabbi. I'm not really a rabbi. A lot of rabbis are not really rabbis, but me, I'm really not a rabbi. What am I? Even a title rabbi, I'm not part of this Sanhedrin. I wasn't ordained by the great Bet Adin that's sitting in Jerusalem. None of us were. And now that the Spanish Inquisition is not over, but the Jews have fled from it, when did the Spanish Inquisition end? Do you know?
No, that started.
Started in 1492.
Mexico was still being burnt in Mexico City, like 1850s.
That's right, in the 1850s. The Inquisition office in New Mexico closed its doors in 1927. And it still exists, by the way. They just don't call themselves the Inquisition anymore because it doesn't sound good to have an Inquisitor's office of the Catholic Church. So they renamed it. It's something they look to find if there are Catholics that are really faithful to the Catholic religion. So the Inquisition is not over. We're still suffering today from the loss of Jews from the Inquisition.
Over 500 years?
It's a terrible thing. Yeah. Over 500 years, and according to conservative estimates, about 50 million Jews later. We lost 6 million Jews in the Holocaust and 50 million in the Spanish Inquisition. The more liberal estimates put that number somewhere closer to 150 million people. The descendants of those Jews who were forced to convert in Spain. You know what 150 million people are? Rabbi Yitzchak Lopez, if you want to pronounce his name. Rabbi Yitzchak writes in his commentary on the Tanakh that when Hashem promises Avraham Avinu that his descendants will be like the stars of the sky and the sand of the sea, he's referring to the Bnei HaAnusim, the children of the Anusim, of those who were forced to convert, that will come back to the Jewish people. That's when we will be a nation. Imagine, we'll go from 13 million people to 50 million people, to 150 million people. What can I do that Am Yisrael doesn't want to help? Am Yisrael doesn't care enough? But we still feel the Inquisition. So the rabbis run away, they find themselves sitting in Tzfat, they're learning Torah in unprecedented levels, and Mahari Berav ignites his desire. Let's build a Sanhedrin. Let's re-establish the central power of the Jewish people. And he sets out to get the approval of all the rabbis he could get his hands on. And every one of the Chachamim of Tzfat, that's where pretty much all the rabbis were living, approved that they should start a Sanhedrin. And Mahari Berav establishes the first meeting of the Sanhedrin, in which he gives ordination to a number of rabbis, among them Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch. It doesn't last for so long. Good periods in Jewish history don't last forever. Most of the time, what messes it up for Jewish people? Who messes things up for the Jewish people? Not just the Jewish people. Who of the Jewish people? The rabbis. I'll tell you the truth. You were going to say it. I know that. I said it instead. What do you mean the rabbis? You ever see how much rabbis fight with each other? I know, that's kind of one. Do you ever see the things that rabbis would say about each other that you would never say about people? The way they talk trash about other people, entire communities of people. Let's be honest, I'm telling you here something true. Yesterday I watched some clip. A Sephardic singer, Ashkenazi singer, one of them surprised the other one on stage. Basically, the Ashkenazi singer was singing the song of the Sephardic singer. He didn't know that the Sephardic singer was in the audience. The Sephardic singer got up and he took the microphone and he did a duet with him. And they hugged each other and they kissed each other and sometimes I see these, concerts happening in Yerushalayim. A Hasidic singer, a Yemenite singer, a non-religious singer, a ultra-Orthodox singer. They can get along. The singers manage to get along very well. Somehow the musicians might bring them a shit. But the rabbis? When's the last time you ever saw two rabbis singing in the same room? When? Singing together? Yeah, right. There's a rabbi sitting in Yerushalayim. If you want to read his name, you could read his name. I don't want to say bad about him in public. He decides, how dare you establish a Sanhedrin in Tzfat? What about us rabbis of Jerusalem when we chop liver? There's a little flavor of arrogance here. Okay. Like, why didn't you ask me? Why might he ask you? So come join. You're welcome to sit with us. No one's excluding you. It happens to be there were 3 rabbis in Jerusalem and 100 rabbis in Tzfat. That's why we live in Tzfat. And he decides, I'm going to make sure that the Sanhedrin doesn't continue. He starts making problems. Mahari Berav says clearly the time has not come for the Sanhedrin to unite the Jewish people. If we're still fighting about whether or not we should unite the Jewish people, then we're not ready for it. And though there's a tradition that says the smicha continues for 4 generations later, do you know who the last of the Sephardic rabbis who has new Sanhedrin smicha is? His name is the Ri'af. You'll find him if you study the Talmud. And the commentary in the Talmud, and in the stories of the Talmud, in the Ein Yaakov, he has a commentary on the bottom. His name is Rabbi Yoshayahu Pinto. An old Rabbi Yoshayahu Pinto. He was 4 generations after Maran. He was the last of the Musmachim, the last of the rabbis who received ordination from someone who received ordination from this Sanhedrin. And the fact that the Sanhedrin chose Maran, that he's the one that should be ordained, it tells us something about the way that the rabbis of Maran's generation viewed him. And I'm going to tell you now what I told you last week, but I'm going to say it again. To every rule there is an exception except for this rule. There is no such thing as a rule that does not have an exception. We Sfaradim are very famous for telling the whole world, we follow the Shulchan Aruch right and left. We follow the Shulchan Aruch to be strict or to be lenient. We follow the Shulchan. I read a whole chapter about it. Look at my book. But we're liars. You know that. I'm not. We're all lying. We follow the Shulchan Aruch except for when we don't. Just like the Shulchan Aruch says. We follow the Rambam in everything that he says, except for when he doesn't. Just like Rabbi Chaim Palaji writes, we follow the Chidah, Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai, in everything that he says, except for when we don't. And these rules in general, that we follow everything all the time, everywhere, those are rules that are meant not to tell you that this is the rule, but it shows you what it is that the Chachamim of our people have felt about these authors. When we talk about the Rambam, we don't talk about him like we talk about the rabbi of your synagogue. Whoever he is, and as great as he might be. Because the Rambam is a whole different caliber of Talmid Chacham. It's not just he knew a lot or he wrote a nice book. The Rambam has a place in our Jewish tradition. Tanakh, Mishnah, Talmud, Rambam. He's straight down the food chain. Not everybody merits to such a thing. And those of us who believe in Hashgacha Pratit and divine providence believe that the Rambam, there's a reason why he's there. There's a reason why his books were chosen by the Jewish people over a dozen other books that could have been chosen by the Jewish people. And the same with the Shulchan Aruch. And last night I gave a class in San Diego. The same with the Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Yisrael. Almost every class I'm going to tell you that we don't follow him in Halakha. But there's a reason why from all the thousands of commentaries that were written in the Shulchan Aruch, Maran and Ramah have become the staple commentaries of the Shulchan Aruch. What does that mean? It means that we give them a certain level of respect. Does it mean that we're bound forever? No. Does it mean that we're not allowed to think anymore? No. Does it mean that we're not allowed to question halachot? No. When you're a Talmid Chacham, when you're a Torah scholar, your obligation is to find the truth. Not to pledge allegiance to the flag of a certain rabbi or another rabbi. But at the same time, when you're studying halakha, you have to have a guide. What's the direction you're following? And so here's the rule that I'm saying. The halakha in the Sephardic communities, since Maran's time, has been that Maran is our guide to the world of halakha. We added a level. After the Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch. Are there times where the Shulchan Aruch disagrees with the Rambam? Yes. Of course. The Shulchan Aruch was his own Talmid Chacham. He has the freedom to rule against the Rambam. You also have to figure out which one is correct. After the Shulchan Aruch, we don't really pledge allegiance to anybody else after that. But these books of the Mishnah and the Talmud and the Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch are the staples. And when we study here together, it would be impossible for us to bring 10,000 opinions to the table. Because believe it or not, there are 10,000 opinions, but everything you're going to say in Judaism. But when we say we study the Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch, is in the Sephardic world, in the Ashkenazi world, it doesn't make a difference where you go. These rabbis are considered authoritative. And don't catch me on that word authoritative of, well, what about here? What about there? Everything with a rule. Everything has an exception. That's Rabbi Yosef Karo. That's Maran. When it boils down to things, Sfaradim and Ashkenazim, Pesach is right around the corner. Tell me, what's the difference between Sfaradim and Ashkenazim when it comes to Pesach? Everything. Everything.
Day and night.
Day and night. I don't know, but the rate the Sfaradim are going over here, I see that we're almost going to be just the same thing. We're almost becoming united. Almost all of us are going to be Ashkenazim. Kidney. Everyone knows about rice and beans and corn. I'm telling you, my family is half Moroccan. My mother, no beans, no rice, no corn. I always thought it's not worth being a Sfaradi after. You don't even enjoy Pesach. My father, he's Yemenite. I mean, Yemenites have been eating grasshoppers. There's a whole but he doesn't eat beans and rice and corn either. Why? If you're married to a Moroccan woman, you'll understand how dangerous it is to argue. Sfaradim have, Ashkenazim and Sfaradim, we have a few hundred laws when it comes to Pesach. A few hundred laws. And the difference between Sfaradim and Ashkenazim on Pesach are exactly 13 laws. 13. Now, there are 13 major ones. They're night and day laws. They're not like little details. But these 13 laws are essentially what set the difference between Sfaradim and Ashkenazim. But it's not such a big deal. If you think about how many laws we have on Pesach, and we agree on everything except for 13 places, we're doing pretty well. If Sfaradim follow the Shulchan Aruch and Ashkenazim follow the Ramah, the commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, you and I would be in a good place. You and I would be in a wonderful world in which Sfaradim and Ashkenazim agree 95% of the time. And the other 5% of the time, okay, so we'll make it work. See, because no matter where Sfaradim were in the world, if it's Iraq, if it's Iran, if it's Morocco or Egypt or Tunisia or Libya, wherever we follow the writings of the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch, you'll notice something very interesting. Regardless of which Sephardic community you go to, you'll hear different tunes, that you'll hear. But when it comes to eating food and Pesach and Shabbat, we're almost all doing the same exact thing. Almost. All doing the same exact thing. What's the philosophical difference between the laws of Shabbat in Iran versus Iraq? Nothing. It's just a border that we didn't make. What's the difference between Egypt and Syria when it comes to the laws of Tisha B'Av? Nothing, Kevin, nothing. And it used to be that with Ashkenazim we were just a few percent off. But as time keeps moving to the future, and we keep going away and away and away from what it actually says in the Jewish books, then we find ourselves becoming more separate and more separate and more separate and more separate, that we almost don't recognize each other anymore. That it comes to a point where sometimes we wonder, are we really practicing the same religion? And so here comes the rally of those rabbis who try to get everyone to rally around the Shulchan Aruch. Some people take this very personally. Why are you trying to force the book on me? I'll tell you the philosophy behind it. The philosophy is if we could get everyone to start reading books again and to follow what it says in the books, we'd go back to being just 3% different from each other. And that's the hope. That's the dream. Though it can't happen through coercion, you can't force people to follow what you want them to follow. But when I say we should follow Shulchan Aruch, the dream behind that is that it should be okay for you to go to somebody's house, Ashkenazi, Sephardic, or likewise, and you know that in this house they follow the code of Jewish law like you follow the code of Jewish law. And if it means sometimes giving up on things, okay, we'll do it. If it means sometimes taking on new things, we'll do it too. I want to take a tangent for 1 minute before I use the source sheets in front of us right now. There's a famous rabbi, his name was Chacham Ben Zion Meir Chai Uzziah. Have you heard of him before? Has anyone heard of Rav Uzziah? Can I you? Don't smile. Rav Uzziah, I would like to take a poll, by the way, one day. Have you heard of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein? Have you heard of Lubavitcher Rebbe? Have you heard of, I can make a list now. Have you heard of the Chametz Chaim? Yeah, okay. You heard of Ben Zion Meir Chai Uzziah? When I used to be like that too. I was in 11th grade. In 11th grade Jewish history class. In my yeshiva in Baltimore. And this one rabbi, he was the expert of Jewish history. And the class that he gave was, he said after the times of the Rambam, when the Jews left Spain, there were no more Sephardic rabbis in Jewish history. And I looked at him and I said, I mean, it can't be true. He said, sure, name me Sephardic rabbis. And what am I going to tell him? Nobody had ever taught me Sephardic rabbis. I mean, I knew like the Baba Sali, and I don't know if I even knew who Rabbi Yosef was. Maybe in Yeshiva I already did. Who taught us? Where do we know? We have to know. What do you think? All of a sudden our rabbis got wiped out in a plague and we were left floating around with Kabbalistic amulets in the desert and sitting in the sand? Well, go, we have a tradition, a heritage, a history. So I'd like to start researching different Chachamim, and it's important for you. If you have notes somewhere, every time you get the name of a Chacham, and I try, always on my way back to San Diego, I try to send you the name of every rabbi that I mentioned in the class. I'm sorry if it bothers you, 1 o'clock in the morning, but your phone is beeping. Think about it, 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm still driving home to San Diego. It's be okay. You'll live. Rav Ben Zion Meir Chai Uzziah was accused by Rabbi Yosef, who came after him, alav shalom, to both of them, that he was an apologetic.
I know who this rabbi is.
What?
I know who the rabbi is.
You know who the rabbi is?
Yeah.
He accused him of being a Sephardic apologetic. Let me explain. Rav Uzziel becomes the first chief rabbi of Israel in the 1930s. This is at the time where the Jews are starting to build the Jewish state. We're fighting the British. We're blowing up, the King David Hotel. Things are happening in the land of Israel. The Arabs are fighting us. The British are fighting us. The Zionist parties start to be formed. The Mizrahi world movement begins to be formed. Rav Uzziel is the chief rabbi of Israel. That means that he's the rabbi where it's watching all the Jewish people come back to the land of Israel fighting for a homeland. And in 1948, when the state of Israel is established and he dies in 1953, Rav Uzziel says, how long are we going to be able to reestablish our homeland, make for ourselves a Jewish community, But we're going to always be Sfaradim this and Ashkenazim that. And Sfaradim this and Ashkenazim that. How long can we live like that? He said if it was just Sfaradim and Ashkenazim, we would be happy. But it's not Sfaradim and Ashkenazim. What kind of Sephardic are you? What kind of Ashkenazi are you? Are you Hasidic or not Hasidic? Which kind of Hasidic? Every little group has its own. Someone sent me something now. It was something that didn't even need to have a kosher label and had 4 kosher symbols on it. Why 4 kosher symbols? Because these 4 people, whose names I can't pronounce, they don't trust each other that the food is kosher. That's the place where we live. You think it's a new thing that people don't eat in each other's houses? There's a letter from Rabbi Chaim Abulafia. Write that name down too. Rabbi Chaim Abulafia was the chief rabbi of a place called Tiberia, Tiberias, over the Sea of Galilee. It's almost 100 years ago that he writes the letter. He says something he cannot understand in the city of Tiberia. He said, do you know that Ashkenazi Jews will not eat out of the ovens of Sephardic Jews? That when the food, you know what dafina is? Chamin, cholent. They heat it up in the oven. How do you have chamin? You think we had a Jewish oven? There's some Arab over there, has a bakery, he's running all the time. What do we do to the Arab? Say, here, take $1. I'm going to leave my pot in the back of your oven. And all the Jews leave all their food, believe it or not, in a not kosher restaurant, in the back of the oven. Who's supervising it? Muhammad. Supervising. Under the strict supervision of, yes? And what happens on Shabbat morning? On the way home from the synagogue, what do you do? Hey, Muhammad, pick up my chamin. You pick it up, you go home. By the Arabs, we could put our food. But if you were to heat up your food in my oven, there are people who wouldn't eat it. This is already 100 and some years ago. It's nothing new. Rav Uziel says we're reestablishing the Jewish people in the homeland. Literally, we're hitting the reset button in history. And you want to reset with denominations? You want to press reset and make sure that Sfaradim and Ashkenazim still stay separate? Let's do something. He writes a little pamphlet. I have it at home. It's called Ha'asfuli Shivim Zkenim. Gather for me 70 elders. Send me. Let's make a world union of rabbis. You want? Let's make a table like this. You want? How many kinds of Sfaradim are there? Tell me. How many kinds of Sfaradim? Name. Every country where we were in. So, bring me one Iraqi rabbi, one Iranian rabbi, one Turkish rabbi, how many Ashkenazi rabbis? More. How many Hasidic rabbis? He said, get me a room full of a rabbi that the whole group will listen to. So you want to talk about Chabad? Send me the Lubavitch rabbi. You want to talk about the Lithuanian people in New York? Send me Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. You want to talk to me about the Rachmastrivsk Hasidim? Good, send me their rabbi also. Send me a room full of rabbis. And we're going to sit down and we're going to start from A and go to Z. And every halakha, okay, let's talk about Shabbat. Let's talk about electricity on Shabbat. Let's take a vote. Let's talk about kashrut, shechita. Do we eat the front of the animal, the back of the animal? Let's talk about it. And let's fight it out. At the end of the day, we're going to come to an agreement. And if it means that sometimes Ashkenazim are going to decide to follow Sephardic halakha, good. And sometimes Sfaradim will follow Ashkenazi halakha, good. But by the time we reach the letter Z, we're going to be one people. You know how many rabbis signed on to Rabbi Uziel's grand worldview? Nobody. He sat at the table alone. Nobody. And Rabbi Uziel writes a letter at the end of his life saying, we could have solved the problem of Jewish unity in 1948. But the boat's already set sail. He said, I'm not sure that we're ever going to catch it again. I don't know that we're ever going to be able to catch up to that boat. And his student, Rabbi Chaim David Halevi, who's a very interesting Sephardic rabbi because he has 2 teachers. Rav Uziel, who's a Sephardic chief rabbi, and Rav Kook, who's an Ashkenazi chief rabbi. He studies by both of them. He writes a letter saying, it's over. We can't do it anymore. We can't fuse the Jewish people into one. The very least that we can do is take upon ourselves the responsibility of knowing every Jewish law to the point where we know what is good for Sfaradim, what is good for Ashkenazim. That when we teach in our schools, we're not teaching only one way to Judaism. We're teaching our children all the traditions that exist in the Jewish community. That when we have synagogues, that in those synagogues we make sure that there's representation of every Jewish community that exists, so our families and our children will know that we're part of one people. And ultimately they'll get married to each other. And they'll have children together. And what'll be? We'll just have to become one at the end of the day because it just happened. Organically. Naturally. There's not going to be 70 rabbis sitting around the table. Because remember, rabbis, they always get in the ways of things. They're always making problems. The people though, the people can solve things that nobody else can solve. Look, I'm married to a Hasidic lady. What do I mean Hasidic? Really Hasidic, like not what you think in LA Hasidic. Grew up speaking Yiddish, I don't know, believing in all kinds of interesting things. A whole different culture, a whole different world, a whole different approach. We ended up getting married after a year and a half of both of our parents not wanting us to marry each other. One of the family members said, we don't want to impurify, there's a word for it, we don't want to contaminate our bloodline with this kind of Jewish people. What?
In Spain, they used to say sangre limpia.
Oh, very good. Yeah, this was and guess what happened? We got married anyways. And my kids are some weird, strange combination. Like, buy a dog, there's like purebred, and there's, that one is ear, it's over here. We have children like that, Baruch Hashem. My kid is going to grow up and, he's got a hard time because his dad is a Sephardic rabbi and his mom is a fanatical convert to Sephardic Judaism, so she's even worse than me. But at the end of the day, that's a part of his life. And when my kids look to get married, I hope the conversation they're going to have with each other is, oh my gosh, how can I marry somebody from New York? I'm from California. We're so cool. And you guys are so... That's going to be his problem. Not where did your grandparents come from, which country they lived in, which non-Jews killed them best. We're not going to have that conversation. But in order to do that, it requires education. Education. That's what I came here all the time. I come to LA for this reason. We're going to learn Halacha now. And you're going to see it's not so simple to learn Torah. Not that it's hard, it's just not simple. You have to know a lot. And when you know a lot, it means you have to work a lot. And some people at this time of the night, they'd rather be home, sitting on the couch, watching TV, flipping through the channels, falling asleep, getting something to drink, go back to the couch, end up in bed. Tomorrow morning, they'll deal with life. And yet there's a group of people here who cares enough about their Jewish education that you're saying, hey, I want to learn Torah. I want to become an educated person. I want to know more. And so you're my hope that from this room, people will be educated to the point where you'll know answers to things. What do you mean, what kind of answers? I want you to be able to tell your kids when they ask you a question, well, it depends. Sfaradim do this, and Ashkenazim do that. They ask you, so who's better? You're going to say, nobody. Everybody's good. We're Jewish people. We get along with each other. We might pray a little bit differently, but we know each other's traditions. Because I'll tell you what happens right now. My kids go to, I'm not saying school, they go ask a rabbi a question, and the rabbi will answer them a question. Yes? No? He won't tell them why. He won't tell them if he's ruling against their tradition. He won't tell them if something that they doesn't know. How many times do you ask Rabbi, is this kosher? He says no. Says who? How do you know? Because you live in a Jewish community. 1,000 years ago, when we sat around in rooms, we talked about lofty things like, is Hashem one? Who created the world? What happened before the creation of the world? What's going to be at the end of the world? You know what people talk about today? The whole day I'm looking on the internet. What are Jews talking about? Is mocha mixed dairy or it's parve? This is the crisis facing the Jewish community. They changed kosher symbols. Can you imagine? And you see rabbis are writing articles about mocha mix being kosher or not. Rabbis used to write books about philosophy, about science, about wisdom, about morals and ethics. Now they're writing about mocha mix. The only people that are going to save Am Yisrael are the people who are willing to sit down and say, I don't have time for mocha mix right now. Right now I want to learn halacha. You want to drink some white corn syrup later, you could do it on your own time. But right now we have to learn Torah. So right now, if you have these pamphlets in front of you, there were 5, and I know they have no numbers on them, and they have no order to them, so I'm asking you to be brave a little bit and just venture with me into the world that is halakha. This one, have you seen this one before? It's, if you're on your phone and you're in the Google Classroom, it's packet number 1. If you don't want to read through everything, you can just listen to everything. But does somebody have one of those charts that has the Tanakh and the Mishnah, and it's a colorful one? Can I borrow yours? I want to take one halakha. One halakha that is not complicated. Why? It's not a passionate subject. It's not getting anybody in trouble. It's very neutral. Because I don't want to get stuck on, oh my gosh, I went to the class, Rabbi only said pigs are kosher. It's not what I want to happen right now. Right now we're going to discuss a very boring area of Jewish law, but I want to show you clearly how it evolved and what it is that we do today, and how beautiful it is when you're able to look inside sources. So we're going to begin with the Jewish law that starts in the Torah, the book that Hashem gave us on Mount Sinai. So I'm starting over here in the Chumash. You're used to using Chumashim. What kind of Chumashim they use in your synagogue? What color are they? Blue, art scroll. How big is it? This one? It has Hebrew on one side, English on the other side, and collected censored commentaries on the bottom. What they want you to know is what they put on the bottom. What? Oh, okay. Yeah. Sukkot David one. It's even smaller. Better. I want to show you, when we study Chumash, this is just one of the 5 books of the Chumash. And so if you're going to open up a pasuk, I don't know, random pasuk, let's say over here, number 1, 10. So this is the Chumash right here. And this is, let's count commentaries, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, you get the point? 13, 14, 15, on one verse of the Chumash. Because when you learn Torah, you can't just get the censored version. Hebrew on one side, English on the other side, and that's the end of the Chumash. The Chumash is a book given us by God on Mount Sinai. And so, step number 1, it's packet 1 that's in front of you. It looks like this. This is something you say, hopefully, 3 times a day. Let's read it together. It says page 82 at the top. Verse Dalid. You can probably recognize it. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. You know this one? Hear, O Israel, Hashem is our God, Hashem is one. Yeah, and then the Torah continues. Ve'ahavta. I'm going to page, so that's all commentary, page 84. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha. You shall love Hashem your God, bechol levavacha, with all of your heart, uvechol nafshecha, with all of your soul, uvechol meodecha, with all of your possessions, everything that you own. Meaning, love Hashem with everything you've got. Ve'hayu hadevarim ha'ele. And these words, which words? Which words is he talking about? Shema, the words of the Shema. Asher anochi mitzavecha hayom, which I am commanding you today, al levavecha, put them on your heart. What does it mean when the Torah tells you put something in your heart? It doesn't mean to go get a sticker with the Shema, stick it here. It means you should think about these in your heart. Feel these words. Vishinantam levanecha, and teach them to your children. V'dibarta bam, and speak to them. B'shiftecha bevetecha, when you're sitting in your house. U'v'lechtecha v'derech, and when you walk on the road. Page 86. Uvshoch bechal v'kumecha, and when you lay down and when you wake up. I once saw a prayer of a rabbi. It's a prayer for parents whose children are entering 1st grade. What kind of prayer do you have to pray when your kids go to 1st grade? I don't have the text in front of me. But the text says something along the lines of, Hashem, I pray that my children find teachers who love them, who care about them personally. May the things that I teach my children at home match up to the things my teachers teach them at school. And may the home and the school not become a conflict in the life of my child. May they find good friends. May they find... It's a good prayer. You can write your own. When you send your kids to school, you know the scariest thing about... I have my twins, my little girls. They're 7 months. I just signed them up for school. I have to go back to work. That's life. And I think, these girls, they were with me the whole day. The whole morning. I wake up, I go to sleep, they're in my arm. One is here, one is in there. All day long. And all of a sudden I go to school and I pay somebody to watch them for me. Are they going to feed them like I feed them? Are they going to hug them like I hug them? You know how many times I kiss my kids every day? Are they going to kiss them as many times as I kiss them every day? Could be, if they have a tremendous teacher. Some people have teachers, they remember them their whole life. And some people have teachers that they also remember them their whole life, but not for good things. And you pray, and I hope that the people that my children interact with at school will love them and teach them the way they can. But you know what's special about parents? Is the way you know your child. It's why when your kid becomes a teenager and they put their hands on their hip, you don't even know me. You know that's why it hurts so much. And it hurts so much. I don't even know you. I knew you before you knew you. I knew you when you didn't know how to talk. Look, I'm sorry I'm sharing this on the camera. I knew you when I put you in the bath and you made a diaper, not in your diaper, on my pants. That's how much I know you. And you have the chutzpah, you're living in my house, you're eating my food, you're not paying rent, you're using my Wi-Fi on the iPad that I bought you, and you're going to tell me you don't even know me. I hate you. Even that, I'm not giving a parenting class tonight. I don't have teenagers, so now I can speak about teenagers. When I have teenagers, I'll stop talking about it. Even that's a kind of love. It's a mispresented love, but it's a love nonetheless. You love your children, you know them, and that's why the Torah says there shouldn't be schools. Don't send your kids to school. How do you know that these people are going to treat your children the way you treat your children? You teach your children. How do you teach your children? You don't have kosher class. Kosher class is when you help your parents in the kitchen. That's when you learn about kosher. What about Shabbat? You learn about Shabbat when you keep Shabbat with your parents. What about farming? Well, when you help your parents on the farm, you learn about farming. What about math? When you help your parents balance the checkbook, you're going to know how to do math. And that's the way it was supposed to be. But what happens? If I had to teach my kids math, I don't think they'd ever graduate elementary school. I don't know enough math to help them with that. If I teach them Torah, I don't know the whole Torah. I have to pay somebody else who knows Torah. Some of us work, believe it or not, to support our children. And that means that from the hours of 8 till 5, we're not home to teach our children. So what do we do instead? We send them to school. But that's only secondary. That's second class. That's not the best, and that's not the ideal. It's an organic way of life to walk with your children, to learn with your children, to talk with your children, to be around your children. Tonight I was in a restaurant. We were celebrating something today. It was myself and Yitzchak and Rafael and Itai. And I look up for a second, and all four of us were at the cell phones talking to. We didn't even talk with each other. We're talking to the whole world, but not with each other. And I was thinking about someone said to me, I said, in about 30 minutes, I'm having all my friends come over to use our phones and not talk to each other. You want to come? It's the way the world is. We don't even talk to our kids anymore. Think about how fast they grow up. And then they disappear. They get off to school and they get married to people that don't like us. And then the rest is over. It's over. The Torah says every moment in your life is a learning opportunity and use it. That's not what I came to talk to you about tonight. Take the words of this Torah and tie them onto your hand. What does that mean? Tefillin. Yes? Where does it say that? In the oral law. Obviously it doesn't say that here, which is why those who don't have an oral tradition don't wear tefillin, because they don't see that in the Chumash. Vayu letodafot, and they should be a sign ben enecha, between your eyes. Uchtaftam, and you should write them al mezuzot beitecha u'visharecha, on the doorpost. Mezuzah, it means the doorpost. You should put these words of Shema on the doorpost. If you go to the doorpost, you take off the mezuzah, and you open it up, it's going to say Shema Yisrael inside. That's what it says.
Yeah.
So you have a commandment to take these words, the Shema, put it on your heart. You have a commandment to teach it to your children when you walk outside, when you sit in your house, when you wake up, and when you go to sleep. The Torah takes us literally. What do you mean? You have to say Shema twice a day. When you wake up, and when you go to sleep. Twice a day we say Shema Yisrael. Where do we learn that from? Right here. What does it say? What does it say to say Shema twice a day? Yes. Where does it say to say Shema twice a day?
In the Shema.
In the Shema. It says you should say this when you wake up and when you go to sleep. So jump with me to packet number 2. This is a photocopy of a page of the Talmud. Yeah. This in the middle is the Talmud, the Mishnah and the Talmud. These on the side are all a bunch of commentaries. You might have heard of Rashi before, of Tosafot before, of Rabbeinu Hananel. These are all different commentaries, but this is the main text inside of here. We mentioned the Mishnah, that's right here. And then what is the Talmud? The Talmud is it's a commentary on the Mishnah. So basically the Mishnah is a book, and the Talmud is a stenographer recording a conversation that happens when the rabbis are discussing the Mishnah. So how does the Mishnah work? I told you. The Mishnah chooses a topic, and then all it does is it tells you, this rabbi says this about the topic, this rabbi says that about the topic, and the third rabbi says this. It doesn't tell you what to do. It just tells you 3 things. Read with me. This is the first page of the whole Talmud. When do you read Shema at night? From what time do you read Shema at night? Because it says you have to read Shema Yisrael at night, correct? When is nighttime?
When there's 7 stars.
When there's 7 stars? When there's, what did you say? I heard you say something.
After sunset.
After sunset. You know how Jews work? We argue, but we also, they have this comedian who made why Jews don't celebrate Christmas. We have to start measuring how high the tree is and what way. The Jews are very complicated like that. Hashem says nighttime, but when exactly is nighttime? The sunset and 3 stars coming out is not the same time. There's a little bit of a gap over there. When does the day start? If you go ask them in the street, when does the morning start? What would they tell you?
When I wake up.
Okay, you know what? I'm talking about teenagers. Sometimes 2:00 in the afternoon. When is light outside? Which part is the light? You know, it's dawn outside. Dawn is light, but is there a sun yet? No. A little bit after dawn, there's sunrise. So which is daytime? Dawn or sunrise? We Jews, we get complicated with these things. So he says, when do you start saying Shema at night? When is the nighttime? He says, Mish'a she'kohanim nichnasim le'echol b'tumatan. It's from when the kohanim in the temple would go eat their bread. Imagine somebody says, hey, what time is it right now? It's the time that my mother takes her medication. It's such a rude answer to the question. Not even an answer. He's assuming that you know what happens in the temple. See, if you go to prayer every morning at 8 o'clock, and they say, what time should I take my medication? When you go to synagogue. Because he knows you prayed 8 o'clock, right? But if someone's not living in that frame of reference, they don't know what you're talking about. So, let's say, when do the Kohanim go eat their bread? When 3 stars come out. You got it right. 3 stars come out. And until when can you read the Shema? It says you should read the Shema when you go to sleep. How literally are you going to take that word when you go to sleep? Does when you go to sleep mean nighttime? Or does when you go to sleep mean when you go to sleep? Does when you go to sleep mean when people go to sleep? Does when you go to sleep mean it's after people go to sleep, but it's while they're still sleeping? Well, the rabbis are going to argue about that too. Let's watch. Ad sof hashmoa rishona divrei Rabbi Eliezer. You could say Shema until 3 or 4 hours after the 3 stars come out. Why? Because that's the time that people still go to sleep. People are still sleeping from, what time is sunset today? 6. Add 4 hours till 10. Okay. Listen, you have to remember, you're not living where we're living. The Ben Ish Chai says that in Baghdad. What happened? The sun sets. You finish praying in the synagogue. You eat a little bit of dinner at home. And then what do?
Go home. Sleep.
It's dark. You don't have lights. If you're rich, you could put on a candle. How long are you going to put on a candle for? 30 minutes to read a book maybe, on a play Monopoly. And what are you going to do over there? There's no Facebook, there's no YouTube, there's nothing. So you just go to sleep. I think I told you this last time. You wake up at midnight, because that's already 6 hours. You slept a long time already. And then, so in this time that people go to sleep is a few hours after sunset. That's when people go to sleep. Rabbi Eliezer says, if you want to say Shema at the right time, it has to be when 3 stars come out, until people stop going to sleep. They're still sleeping, but they're not going to sleep anymore. So he says, until how many hours into the night? Until the first watch, until the end of the first part of the night. The Chachamim Omrim, and the sages say, who are the sages? When it says one rabbi's name and then the sages, who are they? It's everybody else. So it's Rabbi Eliezer says one, and the rest of the rabbis say, Ad Chatzot, until midnight. Until midnight. So you have the first opinion says a few hours. The second opinion says until midnight. Rabban Gamliel Omer, and Rabban Gamliel says, Ad Shi'aleh Amud HaShachar, until dawn. You can say Shema until dawn. Let's explain the logic. Rabbi Eliezer says you could say Shema for a few hours because people are still going to sleep. What's the logic of saying you could say Shema until the morning? Because people are still sleeping. They're still sleeping. So long as people are still sleeping, you could say Shema. Once the morning comes, what do you want from me? You can't say the nighttime prayer in the morning already. But until then, people still sleep until dawn. But the rabbis have this weird opinion of in the middle. What happens at midnight? What changes in the world at midnight?
The day, it's the next day.
Okay, that's right. But can you notice anything? Are people sleeping more after midnight? Nothing really happens. So why are they saying until midnight? So let's tell you a story. Maaseh, there's a story. Uvau banav mi bet mishteh. Rabban Gamliel's kids were at a wedding. They were drinking some alcohol. That's what happens. Amula, they said, Lo karinu et Shema. We forgot to read the Shema. We forgot, it's already past midnight. Amar lehem, im lo ala amud hashachar, chayvin etem likrot. If the dawn didn't start yet, if the day hasn't come up, you still have to read Shema. ולא זו בלבד אמרו, אלא כל מה שאמרו חכמים עד חצות, מצוותן שיעלה עמוד השחר. And you should know that every time the rabbis tell you have until midnight to do something, really you can do it up until dawn. So then why did they tell you until midnight? If you can do it until dawn, why would the rabbis stop you at midnight? What do rabbis, aside from fighting each other, what else do rabbis do a lot? They make fences. Remember that? We make stringencies. The rabbi said, stop saying Shema at midnight. Why? כדי להרחיק אדם מן העבירה. To keep people away from doing the sin. See, if they came back from the wedding, it's only 2 o'clock in the morning. They still have 4 hours until dawn, so they could say Shema. But imagine if you told people, you can say Shema all the way till the morning. What's going to happen? You're going to come home, you're going to make dinner, you're going to watch some TV, you're going to fall asleep on the couch, you're going to wake up, it's 8 o'clock in the morning already. So how do the rabbis get you to make sure you say Shema on time? They tell you only have until?
Limitation.
Yeah, you have a limited until midnight. But Rabbi says, don't worry, if you miss midnight, can you still say Shema? Yes, because even the rabbis would agree that you can say Shema until dawn. So there's 3 opinions. Everybody agrees you start saying Shema when 3 stars come out. The first opinion says you have to stop after a few hours. The second opinion says until midnight. And the third opinion?
Done.
Until dawn. So far we're on the same page? How controversial is this halakha? I promised you it was going to be boring? Well, I delivered well on my promise. I want to show you how this works. Come with me to the next step. Put away this page of the Talmud and go with me to a page of the Rambam. By the way, you want to talk about Talmud? When I was in 10th grade, we had to study this tractate. So this is a copy of the Talmud. You see how we wore that? We were slaves to the Talmud all the time. The carrier Talmud everywhere. The Talmud ends right here. So this is the Talmud. See these pages? 64 pages of Talmud. And these are commentaries. Commentaries. Now, this is just like, the beginner's introduction to Talmud, light version. If you want to get a little more serious, you buy yourself a Talmud like this one. And this is not the same as the other book. This is the commentary on only the first 17 pages of that one. So there's going to be 6 or 7 volumes like this that are commentaries on that. So what I'm doing with you today is we're touching the tip of the iceberg. But there's a lot to say and a lot of opinions, and rabbis, they love arguing with each other. That's the third thing we do. We fight with each other, we make fences, and we argue with each other. Let's look over here in the Rambam. The Rambam, and like every other Jewish book, the Rambam is in the middle, and what's on the side? Commentaries. Who wrote this commentary on the side? His name is Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch. Why does Rabbi Yosef Karo write this commentary? The Rambam, he gets accused of something. What did he tell us last week? The Rambam said, you're going to have a Tanakh, you're going to have my book, and you're going to need no other books. So the way he did it was he kept it simple. The Rambam says, this is how you keep Shabbat, this is how you keep kosher, this is how you keep... Don't bother yourself with the details, which rabbi said what. I'm not going to give you any arguments, just plain facts. Many rabbis said, hey, Rambam, what about all the background information? We want to know how you got to those conclusions. So Rabbi Yosef Karo, before he writes his own book, he writes no Wikipedia, no Google, no search engines. He goes through all 14 books of the Rambam and gives all the sources for everything the Rambam says. Everything he says, well, here's what it says in the Tanakh. Here's what it says in the Mishnah. Here's what it says in the Talmud, and that's why the Rambam says what he says. By heart, I told you, no search engines. Yosef Karo knew a lot. And that's the first book that he writes. So we're holding a Rambam in front of you. It's the page that looks like this. So everyone agrees, what time do you say Shema? Let's do it again. What time do you say Shema?
3
When 3 stars come out. Until when? First opinion says?
Midnight.
A few hours into the night. The second opinion?
Midnight.
Midnight. Very good. And the third opinion?
Done.
Dawn. We got it down? We're going to sleep tonight thinking about that. The Rambam says, I'm on this page right here. Ezehu zman kriyat Shema. From what time do you say Shema? Mitzvatam mishat yitziat hakochavim ad chatzi halayla. You can say Shema from when the 3 stars come out until midnight. What about the first opinion?
A few hours.
Yeah, where is it?
Okay.
He erases it. Why does he erase it? It will disappear. There's no. He says you can say Shema from 3 stars until midnight. What about Rabbi Eliezer? Where did he go? He throws him out. The very simple reason? If all the rabbis say until midnight, and only one rabbi says only 3 or 4 hours, the majority wins, and he gets rid of that opinion. But you would never know that if you didn't study the Mishnah beforehand, and the Talmud beforehand. And then he says, V'im aval v'cher, and what happens if you forget, and you pass midnight? V'karad shelo ala amud hashachar, and you didn't say Shema, but you still have time until dawn, Yatsa yedei chovato, you still fulfill your obligation. Shalom muad chatzot ala kadei lachik adam min hapshi'ah. He changes the word, the Rambam. The Rambam says the only reason our rabbis say you have until midnight is because they don't want you to get too close to dawn. They're trying to keep you away from messing up. But if you mess up, can you still say Shema? Yes, as long as dawn didn't happen yet. So now that you read the Rambam, how many opinions are there?
One.
There's one opinion. What's the one opinion? You can say Shema from 3 stars until midnight. And what happens if you mess up and you pass midnight?
So you can say
You can say it up until dawn, because Rabban Gamliel is not an opinion. All he's telling you is that the rabbis would also agree that you can say Shema until the morning. The only reason they tell you can't is to keep you away from the Avila. That's all. So you see that already in this level of the Rambam, we already lost one opinion in the front. We lost one opinion in the back. Now there's only one opinion. You can say Shema from 3 stars until midnight. And if you forget, you can still say it until dawn. According to the Rambam, yeah.
so. Rambam basically summarizes the Talmud.
Very good. Exactly. The Rambam is essentially restating the Talmud in simple Hebrew. So you don't have to go and do all the work.
Shulchan Aruch here.
We didn't get there yet. We're still going to get Shulchan Aruch. Very good.
So what book? This is not in the Talmud.
This is after the Talmud in the book of the Rambam. Yes. And this is the first code after the Talmud.
Which is called Mishnah?
Mishneh Torah.
Mishnah
The Mishnah is the one before the Talmud. The Mishneh Torah is the one after the Talmud.
Rambam.
Don't worry. It'll stick eventually. Took me a long time to remember. Mishneh Torah. So now you have the Rambam. The Rambam essentially codifies this law. Let me ask you, if you would call up the Rambam on the phone, if he answers you, by the way, you need a psychiatrist. But if you would call the Rambam on the phone, and you would ask him, hey Rabbi, I'm not going to get home until 3 o'clock in the morning. Can I just wait until 3 o'clock to say Shema? What would he tell you?
No.
No. Why not? When are you supposed to say Shema?
Until midnight.
Until midnight. When are you allowed to say Shema at 3 o'clock in the morning? Only if
You mess up.
you mess up. So you can't plan to mess up. I mean, like, if you would call the Rambam now and say, can I say Shema until dawn? No, you can only say Shema until midnight. But you should remember that if you forget, it's still better to say Shema after midnight than not to say it at all. That's the Rambam's attitude. Let's jump out of North Africa, Spain, Egypt, and let's go smack into the German Jewish community of Spain. Remember the Rosh, this one?
Yeah.
He was the first Ashkenazi rabbi to take a pulpit in a Sephardic synagogue. He became, and that's a whole new world of Sephardim that come out of this. But he is essentially an Ashkenazi rabbi who's teaching a Sephardic community. And his son, who wrote the next book we're going to look at, the Tur, his son is a guy who's raised in an Ashkenazi family, but grew up his whole life in a Sephardic community, which makes him not good, not Sephardic enough for the Sephardim, and not Ashkenazi enough for the Ashkenazim. And essentially, we study his book, but really, I don't know anybody who follows the Torah because he's not good enough for anybody. You would think you'd follow him because he knows both sides, but no, it didn't happen that way. He got picked on the most. So let's read the Torah. I don't know how to show you. There's this page, and there's the one that comes right after it, the second one of it. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4 lines up from the bottom. So it's the last 4 lines in the column in the middle. It says, V'li inyan, sof zmana. So he says, let's talk about for a minute until when you can say Shema. Remember, everybody agrees from 3 stars come out. The question is just until how long do you have to say the Shema? He says, Tanan ad sof hashmoa rishona, shehu shlish halayla divrei Rabbi Eliezer. He says, you can say it until the first third of the night. That's the words of Rabbi Eliezer. Did the Rambam mention that opinion?
No.
No, he tossed it out. The Tur is the next notch, but he's bringing him back. He's reviving the dead. He's bringing back Rabbi Eliezer. He says, you can say Shema for the first few hours of the night. Chachamim omrim ad chatzot. The sages say you can say Shema until midnight. And then, what's the third opinion? Rabban Gamliel says you can say Shema until dawn. The halacha ke Rabban Gamliel. And the law follows the third opinion. V'afilu lechatchila, and this is the last line here. Even on an ideal level, yechol lehamtin likrot, you can wait to say Shema ad shi'aleh, I'm on the third page, until dawn rises. The Torah says like this. Watch. The Rambam says you only have from 3 stars until midnight. And only if you mess up can you say Shema after midnight. The Torah says, no, I'm sorry, that's not how it works. The halakha follows the third opinion.
Till dawn.
You can say Shema until dawn. And even if you say, hey, I don't want to say Shema before midnight, I want to wait till 3 o'clock in the morning, you have every right to say Shema at 3 o'clock in the morning, every day of your life. You don't have to mess up to do that. So are the Rambam and the Torah agreeing with each other?
No.
Well, half yes and half no. What don't they agree about? They don't agree that you can do this
On a regular basis.
on a regular basis, ideally. You can't ideally choose, according to the Rambam, to say Shema 3. The Torah says you can. But what do they agree on?
That you can still say it until.
That's right. They both agree, very good. They both agree that you can still say it until done. So here we find already it's a half and half agreement. The Rambam says you can still say it after done, after midnight only if you mess up. And the Torah says no, even if you don't mess up, you could just plan to say Shema at 3 o'clock in the morning. I haven't been impressed. Everybody's holding on. Half you are sleeping, the other half are holding on. Good job. So now let's walk to the Shulchan Aruch. Rabbi Yosef Karo, what does he do with all this information? By the way, Rabbi Yosef Karo also wrote this commentary on the Torah, giving you all the sources for why the Torah said what it said. This is Ashkenazi and the Rabbi Yosef Karo is Sephardic.
That's a question.
Yes.
Maybe you can address it later if you feel like. Okay. What would the Rambam say about the Torah? I wish I could ask it about a more clear law where they clearly disagree.
Clearly disagree?
It's kind of like they have to disagree, but like, what would the Rambam say about the Torah? What are you talking about? You're totally wrong. Did the Talmud have a clear conclusion?
That's a fantastic question. If the Talmud had a clear... What you're really asking is,
Did the Rambam...
what happens in a case where the Talmud has a clear conclusion, and the Rambam rules that way, and then the Torah decides he doesn't want to follow the conclusion of the Talmud?
That's why I wanted to ask
Yeah, right. In that situation, we really get in trouble, because it's obvious to us who's following the Talmud and who's not. And sometimes, that's the flaw in Rabbi Yosef Karo, at least to some people. To me, it's not a flaw, but to some, it's a flaw. Meaning, Rabbi Yosef Karo all of a sudden will take the Torah's opinion into consideration also. And they say, why do you have to take his opinion into consideration? Not every rabbi who said something, you have to take his words into consideration. And that's why there are some people who purely want to follow the Rambam about this. But in this situation, I think what the Rambam will tell you is whereas he understands the sages to be making a decree that you have to say Shema until midnight, the Torah doesn't understand it as a decree. It's not a rule, you have to say Shema until midnight. The only reason you have to say Shema until midnight is a fence. And a fence is not the same thing as a decree. I mean, the Rambam views the sages' commandment to say Shema until midnight as that's a rule. It's not a suggestion, it's a rule. The Torah says it's not a rule, it's a suggestion. You could choose to ignore the suggestion. And yeah, they are essentially arguing not whether you follow the Talmud, but how strict were the rabbis when they made this rule in the first place. I'll give you an example of that. Now it's going to come Pesach. And on Pesach, Ashkenazim don't eat rice and beans and corn. Sfaradim we do. But there are some Sfaradim who don't eat rice and corn and beans. There are some. I mentioned the Moroccans, for example. You know the difference between the Moroccans who don't eat corn and the Ashkenazim who don't eat corn? I chose corn for a reason, but it's on purpose. The Ashkenazim believe that there's some kind of decree that prohibits them from eating corn, which means even if they found corn and they washed it and it was clean and it had no flour on it, there was no problem with it, they still wouldn't eat it. The Sephardim who don't eat corn, the reason they don't eat corn is because wherever they live there was a problem with flour mixing with that corn. And if today they would have pure corn, they'd have a problem and they would go ahead and eat it. So two people are doing the same thing but for very different reasons. Two people might be saying Shema at 3 o'clock in the morning. One of them thinks he's doing it intentionally. Another one is doing it only because he messed up. So let's look at the Shulchan Aruch. Fuad, I'm sorry if I danced around your answer, but that was my... It's the pages that look like this. And they all look the same. Words in the middle of Rabbi Yosef Karo and then commentary on the side. So, Shulchan Aruch says, in Aleph, where the big Aleph is, Zman Kriyat Shema, the time to say Shema is Balayla, at night. What time at night? When can you start saying Shema? 3 stars. That's one thing that didn't change. Throughout all the texts we read, everybody agrees you say Shema when 3 stars come out. But there's a little detail thrown in here. When 3 stars come out, which kind of stars? Ktanim, small stars. It's like the Christmas tree. What do you mean small stars? Why small stars? Because somewhere in this whole conversation, I'm only choosing one detail of the Shema Yisrael conversation. But in all the books that talk about when you say Shema, the question is, okay, you say Shema when 3 stars come out, but what kind of stars? What kind of stars? Are they the big stars, the blinking stars, the small stars, the stars that look like an airplane stars? Which stars? And so we start using the word 3 small stars. You know why? Because the bigger stars, you see them already earlier. It has to get really dark for you to be able to see the small stars. So Maran is very secretly adding in over here a little bit of astringency. You might have been able to say Shema Yisrael at 7:45. Now you can only say Shema Yisrael at 7:52. Because we're not waiting for regular stars. We're now waiting for small stars. It's like when Shabbat ends. People do this thing where they look for the stars. But yeah, so it's not all the stars. Some bigger stars might not count. The small, you have to know which stars you're looking for. It became complicated.
I actually thought that's what I do. I do count the stars for.
It's good. You're okay. I'm not
Shabbat,
telling you.
no,
You're
but what
especially
I'm
in
saying
LA.
is when-
If you can see the stars through the pollution, you're definitely the night is over.
Well, we're chanting 7.
No,
7.
I don't know where.
Good. Well, that's even better. You probably end Shabbat on Sunday.
I don't know where we got it from. No, it's still earlier than every other calendar. But
Okay.
nevertheless, I thought when you said star that it's meant earlier because as it gets darker, they get bigger. As it's more night, as the night goes on.
Okay, you're right, what
the
you're saying.
when you're looking, when it's still very
When
light.
it gets darker, you see the stars better.
Good.
But you can see bigger, kind of like you can sometimes see the moon in the middle of the day. The bigger stars are the brighter stars, or you can see them earlier in the night than the tiny, tiny ones that you only see later on in the night. So he's adding astringency. It's not earlier, it's later time. Okay? Now let's skip this next 2 pages and go to the page that looks like this. It has in it a big gimel, the letter gimel, a big one in the middle of the page. The next one more. No. You see that? Let's read Rabbi Yosef Karo. Lechatchila, ideally, tzarich likrot kriyat Shema, you must read Shema Yisrael, miyad betzet kochavim. Immediately when 3 stars come out, you have to say Shema. So it's not that you're allowed to say Shema from when 3 stars come out, but it's immediately when the 3 stars come out, you have to say Shema. Very simple reason for this. Like every mitzvah that happens, you're supposed to do it quickly. The earliest that you can. When my boys were born, I did a brit milah at sunrise. You want to wait for 11 o'clock to feed people for free? I don't have time to wait till 11 to feed people for free. And I always thought I'm going to come out with a cheaper brit. And all of a sudden 200 people are in my house for a brit milah. It didn't help. We're just grumpy at 5 o'clock in the morning. That's the only difference that happened. But Avraham Avinu, it says, V'yashkem Avraham baboker. Avraham wakes up very early in the morning to do the mitzvah of taking his son onto the mountain. So we learn every mitzvah you should do it as soon as you can. There's a Halachic Shulchan Aruch. When you come home on Friday night from the synagogue, right away you're supposed to start saying Kiddush. Okay, so let's say you're a Kabbalist, you sing Shalom Aleichem, and Eshet Chaim, and if you're Moroccan, you have Bar Yochai. Okay, you have a song's fine. But sometimes you go to somebody's house on Friday night, and you're waiting an hour and a half till they start dinner. They come home for the synagogue, you're waiting for this guest and for that guest. In my house, the rule is, listen, it's totally okay if you want to go to the beach and Shabbat. Not totally okay, but you're still invited to lunch. But I'm not waiting for you to finish drying yourself up before you come to my house. When I get home from synagogue, that's when I start Kiddush. You're supposed to try to do things early. So Maran is saying, it's not that you're allowed to start saying Shema from when 3 stars come out. That's when you should say Shema. Which is a little bit different than what we read until now. Uzmanan, how long do you have to say Shema? Ad chatzi halayla, until midnight. Very good. V'im aval, and what happens if you messed up? You passed midnight and you didn't say Shema. V'icher, and it was late. V'karad shelo ala amud hashachar, and you read Shema Yisrael between midnight and dawn. Yatsa yidei chovato. You fulfilled your obligation. So who's Maran ruling like? The Tur or the Rambam? The Tur says, you're allowed to say Shema ideally after midnight. The Rambam says no. You're only allowed to say Shema after midnight when you mess up. What is Maran telling you?
Say it immediately.
You should say it immediately. But the time window is from 3 stars till midnight. After midnight, what happens?
If you miss.
You miss it. But can you plan to say Shema Yisrael after midnight?
No.
So here Maran disregards the two, and he rules in accordance with the Rambam. What do you want to know?
Why do they make it so complicated, honestly? The Torah is telling us we have to say Shema at night, and then when we wake up. You're free to do it at night, whenever you want. Why do they have to, the night is, let's say, from sunset to sunrise.
So why do they have to get so
You, as a
complicated?
human being, are free to do it whenever you want during the night. Why do they have to, get into the whole...
That's a fantastic question. You guys understand this question?
Yeah.
Why did it get so complicated?
Yeah.
So there's two halves of this question. I'll end my shiur with this question because I'm done with my sources. It's a good place to end for the next shiur. But if anyone needs to go, I know what time it is, so please feel free. The rabbis make rules not to make your life more complicated like it normally looks like. And most people teach rabbinic law as to complicate your life. But normally they teach you rules in order to make your life easier. I'll explain to you what I'm saying. We know that on Shabbat you're not allowed to cook. Correct? You know you can't cook on Shabbat? What is the definition of cooking? How many of you drink tea on Shabbat? Maybe some of you don't drink tea the whole week, but tea on Shabbat. If you were to think you're not allowed to cook, maybe you're not allowed to make yourself a cup of tea on Shabbat. So instead, our rabbis, what they do is, what is cooking? And they say, well, the urn that's plugged into the wall, that's really hot. If you put tea bags in it, we consider that cooking. But once you put it in a cup, it's already not cooking anymore. The water is already now cooling down. It's a different story. In that cup, you can make tea. And then sometimes they know it doesn't have to be this cup. You have to put it in the next cup. And what do people get stuck on? People get stuck on how many cups do you pour the hot water from this cup to that cup to the next cup. Do you put the tea bag in first and then the hot water? Do you put the hot water and then the tea bag? Are you allowed to mix the sugar in, or the sugar has to go? And people get complicated. But the reason why the Chachamim talked to you about cups in the first place is because they were worried that you might stop enjoying Shabbat because you won't drink tea because you think you're cooking. So the Chachamim are trying to help you get rid of all the gray area that exists. They're trying to help us understand exactly what it is that Hashem is saying. Somehow those of us who study the words of the Chachamim, we get lost in the details. It's like when you're looking at something like this. You don't see anything anymore. And in fact, there's a big complaint in the world that we who are what they call religious, we're so busy pouring hot water in cups that we don't even celebrate Shabbat anymore. I mean, people are so afraid of Shabbat that nobody's enjoying it anymore. But that wasn't the point. The point was the other way around. You see, when the Talmud is being written, there's another group of Jews that doesn't have an oral law. It says you're not allowed to have fire in your house on the day of Shabbat. And what do those Jews do? They sat in the dark for the whole Shabbat. And the Rabbi said, what kind of crazy person is going to sit alone in the dark in their house on Shabbat? You're allowed to have light in your house, but you just have to light it before Shabbat. And they even make a mitzvah. That mitzvah, by the way, is meant to upset the Jews who sit in the dark. In our house, we have to have light on Shabbat. You have to have candles on Shabbat. Because how can you go? The Talmud says you must eat hot food on Shabbat afternoon. You don't must, don't worry. If you don't like hot food, you don't have to. But the idea is you have to be able to enjoy your Shabbat. And the rabbis were worried that if you would take the Torah and worry about all the gray areas, you'll stop enjoying Shabbat. Somehow the rabbis clarified everything for us, and since then, we've complicated everything again since then. Like we need the rabbis to come back again and help us out. That's the real reason why the rabbis are defining night. When are you going to say Shema? Night. At what time at night?
Right. Chatzot might be because people are going to fall asleep, so they're like, you have to say it by midnight.
By midnight.
Or else people fall asleep and then they're like...
It's a practical suggestion. Kind of like there's this commandment that you're not supposed to eat before you say Shema in the evening. You know this? The reason is, not because the rabbis are trying to add a law that you can't eat. I have a student of mine that he works all kinds of shifts in a medical field. And sometimes he comes to the hospital and he doesn't have time to put on tefillin. And then he'll find himself, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he didn't put on tefillin yet. He always prays, he has time to pray, but to actually stop and put on tefillin. So what do I suggest to him? When you can, just don't eat a meal. Don't eat breakfast yet until you put on tefillin. Drink tea and coffee, but don't, you have your lunch packed, don't open that lunchbox until you put on tefillin. It's not a halakha, I'm not making a new rule. I'm saying it's a good way to not forget. It's a good way because when you're hungry, it keeps you awake. This whole idea of the Chachamim, to see that every detail in Jewish law starts somewhere and it ends somewhere. And that's why when you buy a book like this one, which I teach in my class on Sundays, and the book says, it's just a simple code of Jewish. I'm not picking on this book in particular, please nobody get mad. He says, it's superlative to recite Kriyat Shema immediately after 3 stars come out. However, the designated hour of Shema continues until midnight. If the hour of midnight has passed, one may say Shema until dawn, and that's where the book ends. And when a person reads this, they think the Jewish law is very simple and very stupid almost, and it just tells me do this and don't do that and don't. And then you tell somebody, well, it's okay. If you miss midnight, you can still say Shema. What do you mean? My book says you can't say Shema then. Yeah, your book is just a really cute summary of thousands of years of Jewish history being written and Jewish texts being written. And when we study together halakha, what you're going to walk away with is not that the halakha changed, but that you now understand that there's nuance here, there's sophistication here. There are times where it's desperate measure, so the law changes, because you're able to rely on that opinion of, I messed up, I missed the midnight, what can I do? But if someone's going to ask me, can you miss midnight on purpose? No. And B'ezras Hashem, that's what we'll do in the future. I'm ending my class. We have next time that I'm here, I believe the date is going to be the 13th of the month. That's going to be a class before Purim. The following time is the last time I'll be here before Pesach. And so I'm going to plan that the 2 classes from now is going to be a generic Pesach seminar like I do every year. Everything you need to know for Pesach is going to be open to the general public. Every year we do that. Every year the Inquisition comes looking for us afterwards. We'll do it again, B'ezras Hashem. But that will be open to the general public. Next class is going to be the only class until after Pesach that we have to learn together like this. I'm going to put a post in the Google Classroom of a few topics that I would like to, maybe Pesach-related topics. Could be the evolution of kitniot, or why people say you can't have a machine matzah on Pesach, or whatever it could be, soft matzot, something along those lines. And if you could please get in there and say which one you'd like to learn, and I'm more than happy to have that shiur. Next time, Chava, thank you for learning with me. I'm out of town till Monday, but hopefully Yitzchak will be able to get the video on, if not before Shabbat, then right after Shabbat. Thank you so much for coming.